If civil war comes, and I do think it is imminent, you're quite right, it will for us be the price of freedom.
With a population of over 45 million people from more than 300 ethnic groups, Nigeria, a country with vast cultural diversity, was on the brink of collapse. The Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafra War, was a devastating conflict that ravaged the nation from July 1967 to January 1970. This 3-year war was sparked by the declaration of the Republic of Biafra by General Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, who led the secessionist movement. The Nigerian government, led by General Yakubu Gowon, fought to prevent the secession, leading to one of the deadliest conflicts in African history. To truly understand the root of this conflict, we need to go back to the very beginning.
Meanwhile, top-ranking Nigerians, wearing their finest robes, watched in dignified silence as the climax of Independence Day was reached. In handing over the documents to the Federal Prime Minister, Alhaji Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Her Royal Highness handed over sovereignty to a new nation.
Nigeria's independence from British colonial rule in 1960 marked the beginning of a new era. But it also highlighted the deep-seated division among the country's three main ethnic groups, the Hausa Fulani, Yoruba, and the Igbo. This group had distinct languages, customs, and values shaped by centuries of history. Upon gaining independence on October 1, 1960, Nigeria was divided into three geopolitical regions, with the northern region disproportionately larger than the eastern and western regions. The government was led by Prime Minister Sir Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, whose Northern People's Party governed alongside the Igbo-aligned National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon, led by Governor General Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. The Yoruba Action Group Party, headed by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, served as the opposition. However, Nigeria's political landscape was marred by ethnic nationalism, with parties organized along ethnic lines rather than ideology. Voting pattern reflected this, with the Southwest voting for AG and the Southeast for NCNC and the North for the MPC. The Northern region's large constituency guaranteed MPC's control over Nigeria, creating an unstable foundation for the country. As Igbos migrated to other parts of Nigeria, they established businesses and pioneered new industries, but their success was met with resentment from locals, particularly in the north.
One thing I've noticed, Premier, while I've been here, is that Northerners seem to have, I might almost call it, obsession about the Igbos. Could you perhaps explain that to me?
Well, the Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is mainly to dominate everybody. If they go to a village, to a town, they want to monopolize everything in that area. If you put them in a labor camp as a laborer, within a year they will try to emerge as headman of that camp, and so on. Well, in the past, our people were not alive to their responsibilities, because you can see from our northernization policy that in 1952, when I came here, there weren't 10 northerners in our civil service here. Then I tried to have it northernized, and now all important posts are being held by northerners.
It was against this backdrop of rising anti-Igbo sentiment in the north that the chain of events that ultimately led to the Nigerian Civil War began to unfold. By 1966, Nigerians were increasingly frustrated with the ruling elite's lavish lifestyle and disregard for the masses concerned. Rumors of vote rigging, corruption, and backroom deal between politicians and foreign companies fueled the discontent. In response, Major Chukwu Makaduna Nzogu, an Igbo officer in the Nigerian army, led a revolutionary coup against the federal government. The coup resulted in the assassination of Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, and the Premier of the Western Region, Chief Samuel Akintola. However, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was on holiday abroad, managed to escape the bloodshed. Despite the execution of key government members, the coup was ultimately unsuccessful, as it was quashed by different factions of the Nigerian army, led by Major General Johnson Agui Ironsi, who was of Igbo ancestry. Ironsi's ascension to head of state sparked conspiracy theories in the north, suggesting that the coup was a master plan to transfer control of Nigeria to the Igbos. The theories gained traction due to the fact that 4 out of 5 coup plotters were Igbo, and no significant Igbo leader was killed during the coup. The anti-Igbo conspiracy theories circulating in the north eventually became a deeply held belief, leading to a counter-coup on July 29, 1966. A group of Northern Army officers successfully overthrew Ironsi's administration, assassinating Major General Agui Ironsi. The counter-coup remained Nigeria's deadliest coup, as 42 high-ranking officers and over 130 other ranks, mostly Igbos, were persecuted and killed. The bloodbath spread like wildfire across the north for the next few months, as many Igbo civilians were massacred while their properties were looted. The violence prompted over 1 million Easterners to flee back to their homeland, abandoning their businesses, home, and churches. The influx of refugees brought shocking stories of betrayals, fueling fears among Easterners that they were no longer safe in other parts of the country. After 3 days of uncertainty, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, the Chief of Army Staff, was chosen as the new head of state and Supreme Commander of Nigerian Armed Forces. However, in the east, the military governor, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu, was uncomfortable with the choice of Gowon, but argued that Brigadier Obafemi Ogundepe, who was Ironsi's deputy and the most senior officer in the Nigerian army, should take over. But Murtala Mohammed and other coup plotters were adamant. It was either a northern head of state or nothing. The new head of state overturned Agui Ironsi's Unification Decree 24 and reinstated the federal system, but the killings of the Igbos in the north continued. In response, military governor Colonel Ojukwu began urging Igbos to return home. Rumors of Igbo secession spread rapidly. In an attempt to ease tensions, Gowon and other key government officials agreed to meet with Colonel Ojukwu in a neutral town of Aburi, Ghana, from January 4th to 5th, 1967. The Aburi meeting was a crucial gathering between the Nigerian delegates, including Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu and General Yakubu Gowon. The core agreement reached was that each region would manage its internal affairs, while the federal military government would handle the matter affecting the country. Initially, Ojukwu and Gowon seemed to be on the same page, with Ojukwu even expressing willingness to serve under Gowon if he adhered to the agreement. Ojukwu believed that Gowon had accepted all the eastern region's demand, but upon returning to Nigeria, Gowon renounced the agreement during a press conference. Ojukwu issued an edict diverting federal revenues, including oil, to address the eastern region's displaced people. Gowon responded with Decree No. 8, granting him absolute power over regional governments. Ojukwu rejected this decree, paving a way for the eastern region's secession. To prevent secession, Gowon divided Nigeria into 12 states, splitting the eastern region into 3 states and separating the core Igbo territory from the minority region with significant oil reserves. On May 30, 1967, Ojukwu declared the eastern region's independence, renaming it the Republic of Biafra. With the support of the southeastern leaders, Ojukwu severed ties with the Nigerian army and assumed the role of general and president of Biafra. The declaration of Biafra's independence was met with celebration, but it was short-lived as the Nigerian government responded by declaring war. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, with no air force, navy, or sufficient manpower, Colonel Ojukwu remained optimistic about Biafra's ability to withstand the Nigerian army. On July 6, 1967, Nigerian artillery shells bombarded the town of Ogoja, just 10 miles from the northern border. The Nigerian Military High Command launched a full-scale assault on the breakaway region of Biafra, initially nicknamed a police action. Nigerian authorities expected a quick victory, predicting the war would last mere weeks or at most 6 months. However, the Biafran army, comprised largely of untrained and unskilled young men and teenage boys, proved surprisingly difficult, withstanding the Nigerian onslaught for 3 brutal years. By the end of July 1967, the Nigerian Federal Army 1st and 2nd Brigades had successfully occupied the town of Ogoja, Obudu, Gakem, and Nsukka, bringing the Biafran capital of Enugu within their sight. In a surprise move, Colonel Benjamin Adekule's 3rd Marine Commando Division launched a seaborne assault on the island of Bonny, a crucial oil loading terminal in the Niger Delta region. This strategic attack aimed to cut off Biafra's logistics and supplies. As Nigerian forces gained ground in the north and south, Ojukwu, in an attempt to divert attention from Enugu and possibly bring a quick end to the war, devised a counterplan nicknamed Operation Touch. On August 8, 1967, Biafran troops crossed the Niger River and invaded the Midwest region, capturing cities like Benin, Warri, and Auchi. However, the appointment of a governor for the region sparked a disagreement between Ojukwu and Colonel Victor Banjo, delaying the invasion from reaching Lagos. Ultimately, Ojukwu appointed Major Albert Okonkwo, an Igbo officer, as governor of the Midwest. Okonkwo established a curfew and structured the administration to empower those who supported the invasion. However, this was met with resistance from local ethnic groups, and the Biafran soldiers' raid on villages led to numerous atrocities. In a bold but short-lived move, on September 19, 1967, Ojukwu declared the Midwest region a puppet sovereign country with the name Republic of Benin. This declaration lasted only 24 hours, prompting General Gowon to escalate the conflict, removing the police action clause and declaring all-out war on Biafra. On September 22, 1967, Colonel Victor Banjo, Philip Alare, Sam Abuem, and Lieutenant Colonel Emmanuel Ifajuna were executed by firing squad after being sentenced to death. Their alleged crime was negotiating a ceasefire and plotting to overthrow Odumegu Ojukwu with federal officials through British agents. The Biafran 1st Division, led by Colonel Alexander Maduebo's 53rd Brigade, was tasked with defending Enugu as Nigerian troops advanced towards the Biafran capital city. But his unit has been exhausted by previous engagements and was unable to call upon reinforcements. Despite attempts to slow down the Nigerian forces reaching Enugu, the city was bombarded by federal artillery on September 26, accompanied by multiple air raids. On October 1, 1967, Ojukwu delivered a speech over the radio, pledging the Biafrans not to abandon Enugu. But 2 days later, as the bombardment became intense, the Biafrans began to evacuate. Finally, on the 4th of October 1967, Federal Air and Ground Forces assaulted the city and successfully occupying Enugu. The Nigerian government hoped that capturing Enugu would weaken the Igbo support for secession, but this didn't happen. Ojukwu relocated his government to Umuahia, a city deep within the Igbo territory, without much difficulty. On October 5, 1967, federal troops from the 2nd Division stormed into Asaba, a Midwestern city, and began ransacking homes and killing civilians accused of sympathizing with the Biafrans. Desperate to end the violence, Asaba leaders organized a peaceful march, urging residents to pledge loyalty to Nigeria. However, the scene turned deadly when Major Ibrahim Taiwo ordered soldiers to separate men and teenage boys from their families. The troops then opened fire on the gathered males in an open square, killing an estimated 700 men. The federal troops occupied Asaba for months, perpetrating atrocities and destroying the town. The exact number of deaths remain unclear, but the event became known as the Asaba Massacre, one of the darkest chapters of the Nigerian Civil War. Despite several failed peace talks, including one in Ethiopia, mediated by Emperor Haile Selassie, the Gowon administration opted for a more aggressive approach. They imposed an economic blockade on Biafra, cutting off food and ammunition supplies by land, air, and sea. This decision would prove disastrous, leading to the death of approximately 2 million civilians, mostly children, from malnutrition and protein deficiency diseases like kwashiorkor. The international community began to take notice of atrocities, with protests erupting in London and New York. Some Nigerians blamed General Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the Biafran leader, for the suffering of his people, while others saw the economic blockade as a genocidal attempt to exterminate the Igbo people. Notable figures like Chinua Achebe publicized the plight of the Biafrans, bringing international attention to the crisis. As the war raged on, the Nigerian Federal Forces launched a final offensive Operation Tailwind, led by Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo. The assault ultimately broke the deadlock, and after 3 weeks of fighting, the last Biafran stronghold, including Aba, Owerri, and Umuahia, fell to the Nigerian forces. General Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu fled in a private jet, leaving his deputy, General Philip Effiong, to negotiate the terms of Biafran surrender to General Gowon on January 14, 1970.
Opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration: that we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria, that we accept the existing administrative and political structure of the Federation of Nigeria, that any future constitutional arrangement will be worked out by representatives of the people of Nigeria, that the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.
Glad to see you again.
My pleasure.
How are you?
Very well indeed.
Glad to see you again. Thank you.
Patrick Amadi.
How are you?
Excellency.
Glad to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Glad to see you again.
It's an experience.
Honestly.